Muhammad Ali is arguably the most well-known athlete in the world. In June, the greatest passed away. His principles both inside and outside the ring, the heavyweight who rocked the world was him. A champion who redefined greatness and disobeyed governments. Muhammad Ali, however, had to contend with a fight that no punch could win outside of the ring, and a betrayal that was more painful than any loss. It came from the lady he used to love, not an adversary. The very person he believed would support him throughout his heyday. Their brief romance started off like a fantasy and ended in anguish, leaving him with silent scars. What took place in Ali's private life behind closed doors? Was Ali ever able to forgive her? Ali was the man's name. Being one of the most well-known individuals of the 20th century, Muhammad Ali's name is inscribed in history. He was a guy who rose to prominence as a global hero, won the boxing world, and stood tall as a champion of decency and justice. Despite all of the accolades, titles, and admiration, his life outside of the ring was anything but ideal. He experienced heartache, disappointment, and instability in his personal relationships, particularly with the women who were closest to him. Furthermore, most fans were unaware of the resentments and unresolved feelings that Ali carried into his later years. Muhammad Ali was born in Louisville, Kentucky, on January 17, 1942. He was exposed to poverty, prejudice, and the pain of injustice at a young age, while growing up in the racially segregated South. His mother was a homemaker who supported the family during hard times, while his father painted signs. Ali was not an especially threatening or robust child. However, he stood out due to his indisputable energy, innate charm, and early drive. When he was 12 years old, he started boxing, and it all began with something as basic as a bicycle that was stolen. He became enraged upon learning that his bike had been stolen and informed a policeman that he wished to confront the perpetrator physically. Martin, who also coached young boxers, advised him to start by learning how to fight. For the young man from Louisville, it demonstrated that he was capable of having lofty goals and seeing them through to completion. He subsequently made the well-known accusation that, after encountering racism at home, he threw his gold medal into the Ohio River. Ali's Olympic win undoubtedly signaled the start of a career that would rock the globe, despite some historians disputing the specifics. Later in 1960, Ali went professional and immediately established himself as a talented boxer and showman. He was bold, talkative, and unafraid to mock his opponents with clever rhymes and predictions. In contrast to the majority of boxers of the era, he stunned the sports world in 1964 when, at the age of 22, he defeated the formidable Sunani Lon to win the title of heavyweight champion. Few people thought Ali could succeed, but he not only prevailed but also dominated, establishing himself as a new kind of champion who was equally an athlete and an entertainer. Around the same period, Ali's life outside of the ring also took a significant change. He changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali shortly after defeating Liston and declared that he had accepted the Nation of Islam's doctrine. Since many Americans at the time had a suspicious opinion of the Nation of Islam, this choice was highly contentious, but Ali refused to back down. He demanded that his new name be used by everyone. He did this by using his notoriety to start discussions about freedom, racism, and identity in America. When Ali declined conscription into the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War in 1967, claiming his religious convictions and opposition to the conflict, his dedication to his principles would be put to the test once more. He proclaimed that he would not engage in combat, no matter the cost. The reaction was swift and intense. Ali lost his heavyweight title, was prohibited from boxing for over 3 years, and may go to jail. Some viewed him as a man of conviction who was prepared to give up everything for his beliefs, while others labeled him unpatriotic. In 1971, the Supreme Court finally reversed his conviction, supporting his position. Ali was thrust into a new era of famous opponents. When he resumed fighting, it was considered the battle of the century when he defeated Joe Frazier in 1971 in his first significant comeback bout. In a fierce fight, Frazier gave Ali his first professional loss, living up to the title. Ali, however, did not remain down for very long. He defeated the seemingly invincible George Foreman in Zaire in 1974, pulling off what is arguably the most well-known upset in boxing history. Ali's superb fighting plan, which involved letting Foreman exhaust himself before unleashing his counterattack, was on full display during the battle. Then, in 1975, Ali and Frazier faced off once more in a brutal battle that tested both men's physical capabilities. Ali fought 61 times in his career, ending his career with a stellar 56-win record, 37 of which came via knockout and just 5 losses. His status as possibly the greatest boxer in history was solidified by his accomplishments inside the ring. He went beyond boxing to become a world advocate for humanitarian, judicial, and peace issues. Beyond the sport itself, he was adored all around the world for his charisma, wit, and charm. Sports Illustrated and the BBC both recognized his legacy by naming him Sportsman of the Century. Even those who had previously chastised him began to respect his bravery, both within the ring and outside of it. Although the world rejoiced in his victories, Ali's personal life was more nuanced. Behind the dazzling lights and roaring cheers were failed marriages. Relationships that caused pain and suffering at the time did not always get better. Ali was just as flawed in his personal life as he was in the ring. He struggled with issues that were frequently kept out of the public view and that persisted to the end of his life. The females in his life. Muhammad Ali had a complicated personal life despite his fame in the ring. Being famous made him a worldwide celebrity, but it also made his interactions with women more difficult. Ali had 4 marriages and fathered 9 children during his lifetime. Every marriage had a unique tale of love, strife, and even heartache. A side of Ali that the general public seldom saw was revealed to the women in his life. They had to put up with the pandemonium that accompanied being bound to the greatest. But they also adored him. At the height of Ali's early success, in 1964, he got married for the first time. The 22-year-old champion married Sanji Roy, a cocktail waitress he met in Chicago. After startling the world by defeating Sunani Lon, they had a passionate but brief relationship that ended in divorce 2 years later. Despite their short connection, Sanji's romance with Ali set the tone for many of his subsequent relationships, which were characterized by passion, conflict, and occasionally unreasonable demands. Ali remarried in 1967, just a year after his divorce. This time, it was Belinda Boyd, who converted to Islam and subsequently changed her name to Khalila Ali. Ali was 25 when they got married, and Kala was only 17. Their marriage lasted 10 years, which was the longest before he met his last spouse, and they had 4 children together. In addition to being the mother of Ali's children, Khalila was significant in his life because she recognized the importance of his notoriety and his obligations as a public figure. Their marriage, however, was never easy. Deep rifts were caused by Ali's frequent travels, rigorous boxing regimen, and well-known infidelity. Kala, who frankly described Ali as an addict, acknowledged that she frequently had to book hotel rooms for his mistresses. Her struggles to maintain their family's unity while living in the shadow of a guy who is admired by millions but isn't always faithful at home were made clear by her candor. In the end, their marriage terminated in 1977 because Khalila could no longer put up with his actions and the strain became too much. Ali remarried that same year, this time to Veronica Porsche, a model and actress who had been a friend of his when he was married to Khalila. Hannah and Ayla are the 2 daughters that Veronica and Ali have together. Naturally, Ayla would follow in her father's footsteps and become a professional boxer herself, succeeding in the ring. However, despite their shared love and family, Ali's same problems persisted in her new marriage. It didn't make them any easier to live with, though when Veronica later disclosed that Ali's numerous affairs were brief meetings with minimal emotional attachment rather than meaningful romances. The pair spent 9 years together before getting divorced in 1986. Ali married for the last time later that year, and it would be his last marriage for the rest of his life. He wed Yolanda Lonnie Williams, later known as Lonnie Ali, in November 1986. This marriage was based on a long-standing bond. Unlike his prior partnerships, Ali and Lonnie have been friends since they were young. She had admired him long before anyone knew his name, and they had grown up in the same area in Louisville. Much later in life, their friendship developed into passion. Lonnie provided stability that Ali had not experienced in his previous marriages, when Ali's boxing career stopped and his health started to deteriorate. In addition to being his wife, she also provided care for him, especially after he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in the middle of the 1980s. She supported him until his death in 2016, and they had a 3-decade partnership. Lonnie was frequently cited by friends and family as the person who helped control Ali's public persona and made sure his legacy was maintained. Lonnie gave Ali the consistent presence he needed to age with dignity, even though she had to deal with the truth of his past and the children from his previous relationships. Ali's marriages and previous relationships resulted in a total of 9 children. He fathered more children through various partners in addition to the 2 with Veronica and the 4 with Kalila. Additionally, he recognized them as members of his extended family. Many of his children stayed close to him despite the difficulties, particularly when his health issues drew the family closer together in his later years. In particular, Layla Ali played a key role in preserving her father's legacy. She wasn't alone, though. In addition to discussing the difficulties of having such a well-known father, his kids frequently talked about how much they loved and were inspired by him. Ali's enthusiasm for the turbulence of the previous years had diminished by the time he and Lonnie had settled into their new lives. He had to slow down due to his health, and tranquility, family, and legacy became his top priority. However, the recollections of those past disputes and treacheries never entirely vanished. Despite their admiration for his excellence in other ways, they continued to play a role in the narrative, influencing how some of the women in his life recalled him. In the ring, Ali would later defeat giants, but his struggles at home, which he frequently started on his own, would prove to be just as significant as his victories in the ring. Fights outside of the ring. Muhammad Ali's actions inside the boxing ring will live on in history. However, his narrative is not just about his professional achievements. His best battles weren't just against Sonny Long, George Foreman, or Joe Frazier. Additionally, they opposed prejudice, injustice, political backlash, deteriorating health, and the burden of being a well-known person worldwide. Ali's struggles outside of the ring had an equally significant impact on his life as his victories. Being raised in Louisville, Kentucky, Ali was exposed to racism at a young age. Black families were continuously reminded of the restrictions society attempted to impose on them when he was growing up in the center of the segregated South. Ali saw directly as a youngster the humiliation his parents went through. He developed a strong feeling of rebellion as a result of these experiences, which included living with fewer chances than their white neighbors and being turned away from restaurants. He also took pleasure in his identity from an early age and rejected the notion that he was inferior to others. Later on, this pride came to define his character. His self-confidence in claiming to be the greatest was a shield created by years of living in a society that told him he couldn't succeed, not concede for showmanship's sake. At the height of his career, when most boxers reached their physical zenith, Ali also experienced significant difficulties. His unwillingness to be drafted into the military cost him years between 1967 and 1970 that he would never be able to regain. However, his struggles continued after that. He participated in some of the most vicious bouts in boxing history during the 1970s, continuing to experience the cruelty of the sport. The effects on his body were evident by the early 1980s. Additionally, Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 42, a condition that many medical professionals attributed to the repetitive head trauma he experienced during his lengthy career. He gradually lost his ability to speak, move, and have the exuberant personality that used to light up arenas due to Parkinson's disease. The man who used to move with unparalleled ease around the ring suddenly found it difficult to walk and speak. It was devastating for his fans to witness, but Ali handled the illness with the same fortitude he had displayed all of his life. He refused to hide from the world and frequently made public appearances despite his illness. His health issues were just one aspect of his challenges outside of boxing. Throughout his life, Ali also had financial hardships. His extravagant spending, bad business choices, and the expense of providing for a huge extended family caused issues even though he earned millions from his fights. He occasionally got into arguments about money and wasn't always cautious with it. Personal tragedies like marriage dissolution, the stress of his adultery, and the psychological wounds resulting from such decisions were added to this. Ali, however, never let his difficulties stop him. He discovered a new calling in humanitarian activities when his boxing career waned. He was a global advocate for human dignity, civil rights, and peace. Ali shared a message that went beyond boxing by meeting with both leaders and regular people. In the United States, the Middle East, and Africa, he discussed compassion, equality, and justice. He came to represent both moral bravery and physical prowess. He traveled to refugee camps, organized fundraisers for worthy organizations, and rose to prominence as a world ambassador for peace. In addition, his battle with Parkinson's disease evolved into a goal to educate others about the condition and provide support to those who were affected by it. When Ali ignited the Olympic torch at the 1996 Atlanta Games, it was one of his most memorable performances. The world watched in wonder as he raised a candle, representing his personal fight and his unwavering spirit. Even though his hands trembled from Parkinson's, millions of people were reminded by that moment that Ali's greatness extended beyond his youthful, muscular years. It was also evident in the dignity with which he dealt with frailty and decline. Ali maintained a strong bond with his identity as a black man who had been raised in a segregated America throughout it all. Despite becoming one of the most admired people in the world, he never forgot the prejudice of his childhood and frequently discussed it. He was aware that his accomplishments were significant and that he was fighting not just for himself, but also for everyone who saw him as evidence that obstacles could be overcome. Beyond the ring, Ali's life was a never-ending balancing act between success and adversity. He battled against prejudice, political repression, and relationship-damaging personal errors. Nevertheless, he never wavered in his conviction that he was destined for greatness. His hardships highlighted the price of living on such a large scale and the expense of sticking to one's convictions, which further enhanced the significance of his triumphs. However, not all wounds were healed over time. Of all the challenges he surmounted, one was more profound than the others. It was something far closer to home, not the media's condemnation or the loss of a competitor in the ring. He was unable to forgive the betrayal. Muhammad Ali's life was already accelerating at breakneck pace when he first met Sanjay Roy in July 1964. He had just become one of the most well-known men in America after shocking everyone by defeating Sonny Liston to win the heavyweight title. Ali could have chosen the women he wanted with all the attention his new title brought. But there was something about Sanjay Roy, a gorgeous 23-year-old cocktail server in Chicago, that won his heart. He even asked her to marry him that same evening. It was a snap choice that reflected Ali's audacious personality. At just 22, he was full of self-confidence and living in a time when nothing seemed impossible. Within a few weeks, the couple got married in Gary, Indiana, on August 14, 1964. It appeared to be a fairy tale to the outside world. The dazzling woman at his side, the attractive young champion, and a fast-paced courtship that had taken less than a month to culminate in marriage. However, the foundation was already unstable beneath the surface. It was not love at first sight that was the issue. It was the result. Sanjay was marrying more than simply boxer Muhammad Ali. In addition, she was getting married into a life that was controlled by his growing affiliation with the Nation of Islam. Ali's faith was more than just a personal one. It was essential to who he was. He had lately converted to Islam and changed his name, and he was resolved to live his life and run his household in accordance with the movement's principles. But Sanji wasn't ready for the amount of authority and responsibility that came with being his wife. Sanji claims that she was under pressure to follow traditions she did not support from the start. She was expected to adhere to stringent guidelines about her diet, attire, and public demeanor. She believed that the requirements for going to the temple, dressing modestly, and adhering to food restrictions were mandated rather than voluntary. This was oppressive for Sanji, who had been self-reliant and vocal even before she met Ali. She then spoke about being forced into a way of life that was inconsistent with her personal beliefs. For his part, Ali had a different perspective. He believed that these regulations could not be changed. He expected his wife to share his religious commitment, which included them. Tension was always present because of the conflict between her refusal to surrender and his strict demands. Their initial love was intense, but friction soon overcame it. Ali once said that she would not carry out her assigned tasks. She had on lipstick, she entered bars, she wore provocative clothing that didn't look appropriate. Sanji, however, did not hesitate to express her opinions on the difficulties she encountered. She would remember, years later, feeling that she was supposed to battle against the Nation of Islam as a whole. She once said, in her own words, "I wasn't going to take on all the Muslims. If I had, I probably would have ended up dead." This statement demonstrated the level of pressure she was under and how much she thought her reluctance to fit in may potentially put her in danger. Sanji felt that the marriage had devolved from love to survival. Less than 2 years after their wedding, in January 1966, the marriage terminated in divorce. Ali also suffered greatly from the split. In addition to Sanji, his brother Rahman and other family members later disclosed that Ali was devastated by the separation. According to Rahman, it was among Ali's most trying personal situations. Already criticized for his outspokenness and religious conversion, the young champion now had to deal with the public collapse of his first marriage. This divorce was more than just two people drifting apart to many who knew him. It was like being betrayed. Ali had anticipated that his wife would support him and embrace the life and values that characterized him. Sanji perceived his resistance and eventual departure as a rejection of everything he stood for, not just of him as a man. That rejection was more painful than any blow he had ever received in the ring for a guy whose identity and pride were inextricably linked to his beliefs. It was more difficult because of the timing. At this time, Ali's reputation and career were already being attacked on a regular basis. There was controversy around his affiliation with the Nation of Islam. Many of his admirers were upset with his decision to change his name, and the media was examining him closely. His wife's unwillingness to adjust and the breakdown of their marriage felt like another blow to his most vulnerable spot during that storm. Ali was able to forgive political rivals, detractors, and even opponents. However, he carried with him the feeling that his first wife had let him down. He acknowledged that he was unable to move past the hurt for the first time in his life. Has he ever shown her forgiveness? One of the more enigmatic and agonizing aspects of Muhammad Ali's life is still the tale of him and Sanji Roy. Ali never publicly criticized Sanji for the way their marriage ended or said anything negative about her in interviews, in contrast to many popular figures who vent their frustrations. However, there was no sign that the two ever found closure, no reconciliation, and no affectionate reunion in subsequent years. Their romance ended abruptly, leaving unanswered questions in its wake. As he became older, Ali's attention turned from the past to the pursuit of peace. His boxing career ended in the 1980s, and his battle with Parkinson's disease began to take center stage in his life. With his family by his side, and Lonnie, his fourth and last wife, providing for him, Ali focused on his faith, helping others and keeping his kids together. In addition to his boxing prowess, he gained international recognition for his decency, humility, and quiet strength while he was ill. According to those who knew him well, he wasn't particularly interested in harboring resentment. Ali never called Sanji an enemy in public, but he also never brought their past relationship back to life. He was a man who publicly pardoned opponents, journalists, and even political competitors who had wronged him. However, Sanji was surrounded by a startling silence. It implied that even if he refrained from acting out of rage, the hurt might have lingered in a hidden recess of his mind. He even allegedly wrote her a note saying, "You traded heaven for hell, baby," prior to the divorce being finalized. In many respects, Ali personified reconciliation in his later years. As a peace ambassador, he spoke with people from all walks of life, spoke about love and harmony, and traversed the world. However, there was nothing except absence, no reunion, no expressions of forgiveness, and no definitive resolution to his first marriage. The young champion inside him, according to some close to him, never recovered from the shock of that first heartache when the woman he rapidly married and fell deeply in love with refused to follow the same road he had chosen. June 3, 2016. Muhammad Ali fought Parkinson's disease for more than 30 years before dying at the age of 74. He passed away from septic shock, ending a life that had impacted millions of people worldwide. People honored the champion, the humanitarian, and the figurehead who motivated generations at his funeral. The fact that many aspects of his life had most likely never been resolved, however, was concealed under the tributes. They included the recollection of Sanji Roy, the woman he wed in his youth and whose absence left a mark he would never forget. The narrative of Ali and Sanji Roy is undoubtedly still one of the most complex in his life. The marriage, which began with passion and romance, was destroyed by conflicting morals and uncompromising standards. It served as a reminder to Ali that his chosen environment was not suitable for everyone. But to Sanji, it was evidence that basic disparities could not be eliminated by love alone. What are your thoughts? Was Sanji's decision to divorce Ali the right one? Leave your responses in the space provided for comments below. Remember to click on the next video that appears on your screen if you liked this one.